Guten Morgen, Flutter. Guten Morgen, Berlin. Und herzlich willkommen bei der Fluttercon. Ja? So, was Sie vielleicht nicht über mich wissen, ich habe früher einmal eine deutsche Samstagschule besucht. Daher werde ich diese Keynote nicht auf Englisch halten, sondern im besten Deutsch, das man in 11 Monaten an einem Tag pro Woche lernen kann. So bitte, machen Sie sich gefasst auf eine ganze Stunde mit schrecklicher Aussprache, falschen geschlechtsspezifischen Artikeln, Verben nur im Präsens und komplizierten Metaphern über Sportarten, die es in Deutschland nicht gibt. Sind Sie bereit? Are you ready? I am totally kidding. I actually have gone to a German Saturday school. Meine Frau spricht Deutsch. But there is zero chance I can deliver this keynote in German. I'm only 50-50 about whether I can do it in English. We'll see how this goes. If we've never met before, if you've never seen me before, my name is Andrew Brogdon. I lead the developer relations team at Google. And it is my privilege to be with you here today. There are few things in this world I love more than rooms like this, and I really mean that. This community is something special. I want to thank Majid and Simon and Greg and everyone else who has organized this event. It is a special thing. Anytime we can all get together like this, I'm very happy to be here. I'm also, by the way, going to claim that I'm delivering this keynote to 1,500 people. So if anybody sees my manager later, you could all just be cool. I would appreciate it. I will try to use this time in a way that's useful for everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on with Flutter recently, recap a few things. I'm going to talk about one of the opportunities that seems to be coming our way as a community. But first, let's talk about some recent sort of customer announcements. These are always fun to do. Does anybody know Geico? It's an insurance company. It's very popular in the States, but they operate around the world. They recently selected Flutter for all of their digital experiences. They posted this very nice blog post by a guy named Joe Freeman, who immediately became one of my favorite Flutter developers, because if you sit in a room with him, he'll tell you how much he loves Flutter and then tell you 50 things that are wrong with it and need to be fixed, and in detail. And he's absolutely correct on all of it. It's a wonderful friend to have. Virgin Money also recently adopted Flutter and unified their mobile teams and their mobile experiences using the SDK, which is a wonderful thing. You may have seen an announcement about Universal Studios at Google I/O this year. They recently relaunched their in-park experience application built with Flutter, and they partnered on a nice video that went into our What's New in Flutter session this year, where you could see people walking around with their Flutter app and sort of tapping into physical experiences in their parks. They do the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, Super Nintendo World, and some other theme parks, and it was fun to see. Also, the KSML Media Group. They're a Finnish media giant. They transformed their digital presence with Flutter. They used the Flutter News Toolkit, partnered with Rebel App Studio, who I believe are right outside, and some of them sitting right down here on the second row. And they did 17 custom branded news apps. It was 17 when I wrote these slides. I hear it's now actually 20 in just 3 months. And so with 150,000 downloads and a 20% increase in user engagement, they're really seeing some success there, which is great. And also LG announced that they are adopting Flutter for WebOS to power their system apps. And so by next year, I have one of their televisions, so I'm excited to have Flutter in my television nook in my house. But in 2025, they anticipate having Flutter deployed to tens of millions of their televisions, which is pretty amazing. We also had a release back in May, timed for a small tech event. I don't know if anybody heard anything about it. I/O Shoreline. Did anybody here go to I/O at Shoreline? Out of curiosity. Awesome. A few folks made it over the sea. What about IO Connect last week here in Berlin? Anybody able to attend that? A few, awesome. In that release, we had a few announcements. Let me quickly go through them. So Kevin Moore and John Ryan did our What's New in Flutter session. WebAssembly was one of the biggest announcements there. Has anybody deployed a Flutter app to the web before? Anybody? Awesome. Has any out of those folks who's rebuilt it with WebAssembly? A few of them. There's a migration process going through the community right now. But this is an exciting time when the technology, the open standards of the web power Flutter. And so as those open standards change, Flutter can do new things. And WebAssembly is going to be amazing. Impeller also landed in preview on Android. This is reducing runtime shader compilation for Flutter. You can see this is a wonderful animation that I stole from Miriam Hisnani, one of the product managers for Flutter. I stole it right out of her I/O slides because she's a nice person like that. And you can see Skia on the left and then Impeller on the right, which is Flutter's new custom rendering layer. The Global Gamers Challenge, a partnership we had with Global Citizen on games for teaching environmental facts and raising awareness about environmental causes. There's been a big hackathon, and those winners were announced. A lot of them have retro graphics, which makes me, as a middle-aged person, very happy. So it's a wonderful thing to see. And the biggest applause out of everything, I think, in the What's New in Flutter session was for macros. Has anybody, yeah. My favorite bit from I/O this year is if you go back to that video and you go to the part where Kevin says the word macros, there's somebody who literally shouts yeehaw like a cowboy. Like you could hear people start clapping, and then like 4 seconds later, you hear this like, yeehaw just in the background. Wonderful. Has anybody tried these? That is impressive because I looked at the doc before this. There are 7 steps required to enable the macros preview. So good for you for doing those 7 steps. Macros is something, it's like Impeller. Macros is one of these multi-year investments. We've been talking about it for so long, it seems like, and now it's finally coming to fruition, and that's great. But it takes a long time, these things, especially with the language. And so I wanted to point out real quick a couple things that are good stuff to keep an eye on. So who's ever seen the Dart language funnel before? I'm doing a lot of audience research here, I'm sorry, but I like to do it. The Dart language funnel is where all of the plans for the Dart language are placed. So you can see things that are being examined and discussed on the left, and they make their way to implementation and release by going across this GitHub project. It's a wonderful resource if you're wondering about what's coming in the Dart language. So null safety started on the I got to gesticulate more carefully here. Started on the left and then went all the way to the right. And macros started on the left again. And so you can see the things that are coming up in a very real way and watch as they get built. Another is the Flutter roadmap, which used to be in our GitHub wiki, but recently moved. So if you're wondering where it is, it's moved into a docs folder in the repo now. You can actually see one of the commit messages where Kate Lovett was doing the move up there at the top. And so if you're wondering about, sort of the bullet points of the 2024 roadmap and what the team has decided, like maybe we're not going to push on this, we're going to push on this goal, that kind of decision. This is a wonderful resource, and they do keep it updated. But getting back to I/O, there was also one other thing that we talked about, and it was kind of subtle, so you might have missed it. But we also talked a little bit about AI. Some of you saw it was really subtle. You really had to watch to know that they did it. I'm going to talk about AI for a second, but real quick, I want to take a conversational detour here. Out of curiosity, has anyone in this room ever seen this video? Awesome. Okay. No one raised their hand. That's good. This is like the 3rd video I ever made at Google, and I'm pointing it out for 2 reasons. One, so the story behind this, I used to be on the ads developer relations team, and I made a video about banner ads and where you should place them in your application, which is fine, except halfway through the video, I literally called a timeout to give my own freewheeling opinions about what AdMob's legal policies actually meant. I don't know if anybody in here is a lawyer, but that is an incredibly stupid thing to do. I don't know what color exactly the lawyer for AdMob turned when he realized I had done this, but it was not like a healthy color for the long term. So, and I point this out for two reasons. One, I am sort of giving my own opinions on some things here, and I am not an AI expert, certainly not on the level of the other AI experts at Google. So please understand, I don't really speak for the company when I talk about these things. If you hear somebody at Google talking about AI and it sounds like they're saying something different than me, you should probably trust them. The other reason I mention this is just in case anybody's dealing with some imposter syndrome right now. If you haven't done anything this stupid, you're probably doing okay. So, all right. Getting back to AI real quick, and let me do one more bit of sort of audience research here. I'm going to close my eyes just for a second. Who here, just by applause, feels like maybe they've been hearing too much about AI recently? Okay. All right, awesome. If we could have security escort out the people who clapped, it'd be awesome. I'll just talk to the other three of you. So yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit. And if there's one thing I can offer here, it's this. We have been through these hype cycles before, right? Let me just indulge me for a minute as a 47-year-old man, just talking about how it used to be. When I was talking with Hans Mueller, one of the framework leads for Flutter, and we were talking about how all the hype that's going around right now. And he's like, man, you should have been here for the AI boom in the 1980s. Wild time, man. And I'm sure. I assume it was a lot more artificial than intelligent back then compared to what we're doing now, but that's probably what they'll say about our stuff in 40 years too. But the thing that this reminds me of is another sort of hype cycle that I lived through when I first became an engineer back in a glorious time, known as the 1990s, peak of human civilization, where suddenly the internet became a thing. There was a tipping point, right, where connectivity became cheap enough that you could suddenly just start wiring things up in a way that they'd never been wired up, and there were all these ways that people were talking about the net. And there were commercials where people like running around downtown New York trying to find the internet and plug it into their business. And it was just, there were just ideas being thrown around all the time. You could, whatever your business was, if you just put the letter E in front of it, you would get investor cash. You could just have e-commerce or e-this or e-that. And people were just doing a lot of this, just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. Hopefully that's a metaphor that works in Europe and not just, do you say that in Europe? Throwing noodles at the wall to see what sticks? Okay. That's what people were doing. And I tend to think back to all of the things that seem ridiculous in hindsight, right? Like, does anybody recognize this puppet? Somebody, okay. Another graybeard. This is the pets.com puppet, which was everywhere in the late 90s. This is it's a famous .com failure, and they clearly spent more on their marketing budgets putting this puppet into Super Bowl commercials than they ever did in their logistics. And they were one of the first big companies to fail. But there were others. There was Flues, which was supposed to be like an internet gift card, and they had, all sorts of things and beans, and people were obsessed with domain names. You heard about domain names all the time. For example, before Amazon was really Amazon, there was another company called Outpost.com, and they ran this 30-second spot during the Super Bowl. There we go.
Hello. We want you to remember our name, Outpost.com. That's why we've decided to fire gerbils out of this cannon through the O in Outpost. Cute little guy. Fire. And again. So close. Fire.
No gerbils were harmed, I swear. But you know how old that commercial is because it has an AOL keyword listed at the bottom, right? Like that is some old stuff. These are things people were trying to get you to remember their domain name because they were so convinced it was important. And there was all of this hype, and now 90% of those ideas turned out to be bad, and they're gone, right? But some of them stuck. For example, the company currently employing me came out of the .com era, right? And we got other things too. Firefox and Amazon came out of it, and all these things that have ended up being useful, right, over time. And I think what we're seeing now is a similar tipping point with AI and LLMs. This is an image that Michael Thompson, I don't know if folks know Michael Thompson from product leader for Dart and Flutter. He pointed me toward this image. This is generative AI progress on image generation. So, up in the top left, you have like a fake driver's license quality image, something like that. And then around 2021 or 2022, you can see where it gets good enough that it might actually be useful. And then suddenly it's just useful everywhere, and people go off to find all the ways that it will actually be a part of our lives, right? They just try all this stuff. And I am doing that right now. Like the noodles that you saw earlier, these are not real. I used a model to create these from Image Effects. It's one of Google's image generation tools. And these are noodles from the Matrix. They do not exist, right? And it's not, the model's not perfect, but this is easier than me remembering which person I have to talk to buy a stock photo at the company. It is definitely faster and cheaper than that. And it can do things that also just wouldn't have existed before. It took me 12 tries, I think, to make this spaghetti. For some reason, the model was very insistent that dry pasta would stick to a wall. I don't know what training data led to that, but it was very insistent on that. But when I was done, I was like, let's make something just silly. How about show me a turtle made of spaghetti? That is way better than anything I could have gotten from anywhere else, right? And then when I asked Gemini, I used the Gemini chat, I was like, what do you think is a good name for a turtle made of spaghetti? And I swear this is its first response. Literally its first response. 12 times to make the spaghetti. That was first shot out of the barrel. And as uneasy as I am about the idea of a computer model being funnier than I am, this is now the tools that we have at our disposal. And we have this explosion of people trying this stuff. And a lot of it's going to be garbage, right? A lot of it's not going to be around in a couple of years, and we're figuring that out. But there's going to be this process where, all of us take all of these ideas, try them, figure out what 10% are going to stick around, and then figure out how to use those as much as possible. And I'm about to put my big idea slide for the talk up here. So let me go ahead and do that. The point I would love to make in this time that I have with y'all is, number one, I think people in this room and rooms like it are going to determine which of these ideas, especially for developer tools and things like that, actually help. Actually save us time, make us happier, and make us better, right? I think, again, people in rooms like this, in the Flutter community especially, will produce many of the best ideas and figure out how to make them real. And I think this process has already started, right? With Flutter, Flutter is a global, the ecosystem is huge, right? So much of Flutter's success is driven by people that are just part of the open source community and are making decisions like this about what packages am I going to write, how am I going to do things and stuff like that. And so all of you are going to play a part by picking and choosing things in winnowing down all of that hype to what's actually useful, right? Because we are just starting on this sort of road. Right? It used to be that we did not have access to we didn't have access to these, non-deterministic models and LLMs and things like that would generate code for us and things like that. And so we're only a few steps along the way of adopting them and seeing where they can actually be useful. The journey ends, I think, with like Captain Picard talking to the starship screen, where people look back on the kind of coding we've done most of this time, the way that I look at people like writing out mathematics longhand and doing long division that way. Like someone will look at that, look at the coding I've been doing most of my life and be like, so you had to tell the machine literally every single instruction to do, like one after another. That seems like hammering down railroad tiles, or railroad ties or something like that. But that is where we're headed. And like I said, it is a process going to be driven more by individual developers and users than it is anybody working at the big tech companies. And let me give you an example of how our community has done this kind of thing before. This is not with AI, but who's met this guy? Everybody know Philip? All around classy dude, fun person to hang around with. Philip, this is Philip Project. He's not here at the event, unfortunately. He's back home in Prague. But he used to work at Google on the developer relations team. He was our state management expert. And he almost open sourced a state management package once from the Fuchsia team. It's called Package Provide, which you've never heard of because he never released it. He went through all the steps to get it approved for open source, and then the vice president level approval and legal sign off. The day he was set to open source it, he stumbled onto Provider from Remy, the Provider package, and he's like, "Hold on, this does 90% of what I was just about to release this other package to do. Maybe I should contact this guy and talk to him." And so that's what he did. And Remy ended up tweaking Provider a little bit to add a little more functionality. And then we started showing Provider in our docs, and that was that. And one of the lessons that Philip and our team took away from this is that we couldn't decide for everyone what the best thing to do for state management was. It wasn't going to be something that 6 people sitting in Mountain View, California could decide and get the right answer on. And so we did not give state management guidance. Instead, we just sort of looked at what the community was doing. Anybody ever seen the Flutter architecture samples that Brian Egan used to work on? These haven't been updated in a while, so we sort of, we've moved past them. But these were to-do app done over and over again with a zillion different approaches. This is just a collective project that people did to try out state management approaches and libraries and see which ones really worked and saved us all time. And out of this, there are some names in there that you might recognize. There's Block in there, there's Provider in there, of course, which eventually became RiverPod and stuff like this. But all of this experimentation led to some of these now battle-tested solutions that we have for state management. Like how many, folks in here, I'm sure, use Flutter Block, right? Folks use, RiverPod and some of the, okay, there you go. But this was something we all did together. Like I even wrote one of these. This is my state management package, which, by the way, please don't use this. This is just an example. I was first joined the team, and I was like, I'm going to solve state management forever. I did not. But this is a wonderful learning experience. But this is the power that our community has to find the right answers to certain questions, right? And the question was, what are the right approaches for state management? What really makes a good state management library for Flutter and Dart and things like that? Those were questions answered by the community in real life by seeing what worked and what didn't. And I think that's the same process that we're in now. So I swear to God, I'm going to do some live coding in a second. This will get more interesting. But I'm going to have more food on the screen for a second. Another food metaphor. There was a type of cooking that came into fashion about 20 years ago called molecular gastronomy. I don't know if there's Spaniards here right now, but there's a famous restaurant called El Bulli in Spain that invented a lot of these techniques. And they were like, I'm going to make you a thing that looks like an olive, only it's not an olive, but it somehow tastes more olivey than an olive. And that was their thing. And they would make these little spherified foods and stuff like that. And food that had never existed before, they could make using these techniques, like a rare beef soup that was blood red and bacon and egg ice cream and things like that. And they put out a cookbook. There's a cookbook called Modernist Cuisine, which I checked out from the library because it cost $600. And had all these fantastic, Willy Wonka sort of recipes in it. And then buried in it was a recipe for macaroni and cheese. Or for the Germans, if you do it in the audience, Käsespätzle, right? This humble food, right, that had been, at least in the United States, has been around for hundreds of years. This very common thing that you see all the time. They realized that they could take these techniques, which were almost fanciful at the time, using these scientific and seeming ingredients and stuff like that, and they could make this very simple thing better, right? And that, I thought, was a really incredible idea. That you don't have to use some of this fancy technology and stuff like that to make something that's out there in outer space. Make something very simple better, and that is where I think our community can also do some amazing work, right? Taking some of the things that we have right now and making them better using these new tools, right? And so I'm going to do an example here. And I'm sure folks in this room have used GPS with Flutter before. And the iOS simulator and the Android emulator, they have built-in functionality for Test data. You can ask iOS, for example, in the simulator and say, give me just a stream of data on the GPS for somebody walking around Central Park, I think is one of them. It has that built in. Somebody hard-coded that into the simulator. Android emulator, I think you can pull up a map and you can say, pretend somebody's following a route and stuff like that. But very few other packages and plugins have I ever seen that have that level of testing data put into them, because it's really hard to do that in some cases. Like somebody has to sit down and mock out values and stuff like that. And I think one of the ways that's very simple, we could use some of these, language models to do something good, is something like that. So I want to use that as an example, and I'm going to attempt to get out of the slides now and do some live coding, which might involve me changing. Let me do main display. There we go. EU. That says mirror, right? Awesome, thank you. Okay. I'm over here. Awesome. How many folks have ever gone to AI Studio? Okay. Awesome. That's kind of what I was hoping for in a weird way. This is AI Studio. This is a way just to mess around with the large language models that Google offers. And I'm going to mess around with it right now. So imagine I have a package that does streaming weather data. I have some server somewhere that has access to weather data, and I have a plugin or a package that's going to stream that data out, right? And I would love it if I didn't have to hard code a whole bunch of test data just to have some available convenient mocks for people in my code, right? And so I'm gonna start messing with this to see if I can get it to do the work for me. So I asked it, hey, generate some fake weather data records for me. And this is what it came up with, right? So, which is great, but I would love it if I could actually cut and paste some stuff into my actual project. So here I have a simple project. I got a plugin here called Brogdon, and all it does, my Flutter name is turned on. All it does here is stream some data. Oh, I know there's errors. Yeah, it's fine. I have some analyzer errors here. I have a weather record class here, and it's just going to stream some of these objects out with data. And I would love it if I had a mock that I didn't have to actually do the grunt work on to produce this. And I have an example app here. I have the main.dart up, and this is just a little Flutter application that displays the streaming data. All right. So let me go back into this. And I would love it if I could get something out of this that I could just cut and paste in there, like a list of hard-coded objects, for example. So let me try this again. So I have generate some fake weather data records, but I'm just getting data. So let me do some things here. So there we go. So you're an expert. I'm telling the model it's an expert. And create a list of Dart objects containing fake weather data records. I'm just going to save that prompt, and I'll rerun the response. Okay. All right, so I'm getting Dart code now instead of just data. That's pretty good, but it's still, I don't have anything in here I can cut and paste. All right. Let me keep going. Let's say use arbitrary constant data instead of random value. Oh, I have an email. That's good. I'm going to say respond only with Dart. I don't need any sort of explanation, although it's nice that it can. This is the Gemini Flash model, by the way, which is built to be fast and cheap, both of which are good things in my bar. There we go. I'm starting to get something that looks like Dart, right? But I have my own class, and I would love to get instances of that class instead of anything else. So I'm just going to cut and paste this out. Just grab this. Let me go back in here. You may have heard people talking about context windows with prompts, and I discovered when I was messing around with this, because I'm learning this too, is that you can make the model much smarter by just putting a bunch of stuff in the prompts. You don't need RAG or any of these other fancy things that I hear about. You just start putting stuff into the prompt. So here is a Dart class designed to contain weather data. So I'll just tell it about my thing. I'll say, create a list of 5 weather data objects, or weather record. Okay. Let's see what it does with that. All right. So now it's using the right parameters. It's using the right class name. Still got some other stuff up here. Let's get restating the class, which I don't really need. So let me go at this again. Keep tweaking. Let's see. List. Save that. I'm getting closer to just having a list declaration. So this looks very cut and pastable. Let me try a couple more things just to tweak this just a bit. I'm going to say, let's see. Use the default datetime constructor. Each record. Weather should not vary too much from one to another. And then I'll say data should be for, I'm going to give it just a day and a place. So I'm going to use, let's say, November 10th, 1976, which is when I was born. Also, my mother's birthday. She missed her surprise birthday party to have me. I'm told my father went and had a very good time. The place is, so Riverside, California. There we go. Save that. And we'll see what Gemini comes up with. All right. Awesome. And so, one last little touch here. You say, don't mention, just in case, don't mention the location in the description. And let's say, since we are in Berlin, let's do it auf Deutsch. There we go. I don't speak German well, but Gemini should. There we go. And so now I've got something in here that I can literally come in and copy over to my editor. All right. So I have a mock already sort of planted in here. Just put that right there. If I hot restart here. There is that data in my app. And so, thank you. I appreciate that. And like, that took, what, 5-6 minutes? Something like that, which seems like a long time to noodle around in AI Studio. But now that I have that working, I could, in theory, generate 100 of those objects for any location I wanted and paste those into my package as test data. And I would say, like, compare that to how long it would take me to sort of hard code those things and put them into my package. But to be honest, I wouldn't ever do that because I'm too lazy. I would just feel guilty about not doing it. And so in this case, it's sort of like, five minutes to work out the prompt, and then there's some additional, rerunning it and things like that to do something that just wouldn't have gotten done before, right? Because I would just never spend a Saturday afternoon hard coding weather data into a package for something like this. And I think that's one of the most interesting opportunities here is what are the boring parts of software engineering that we're not doing but now we can because they've suddenly gotten a little bit easier, right? I can now, as an open source developer, ship this package to folks knowing that they can test without a connection. They don't have to use my production endpoint for weather. They could just use a hard-coded class in here that would get tree shaken out if I wasn't using it anyway. But they can test very easily during their own development time. But let me see if I can do one better than that. Right? What if I could rig this up to do this on the fly for any location a developer might want as they're testing their UI, right? So let me try that real quick. So instead of Dart, let me request JSON. So JSON list can be easily converted. So list of 5, there we go. So we're going to ask for JSON. Respond only with JSON rather than Dart. Tell it not to include Markdown. Every once in a while, I'll throw a code fence around JSON. Don't need the date time constructor. Don't need initialization for JSON. Let me see how well this will work. Give me. There it is. Okay. And so now I have a prompt. Again, just tweaking the one that I already had. I now have a prompt that will produce JSON on the fly for a given location and time that I can easily parse and put into my service. All right, so let me go wire that up real quick. So again, this is just a simple service here for streaming weather data, right? I've already got this mock that's using some hard-coded values. Let me start adding in another one. I've just been revealed as been using an autotyper because my ability to type coherently is inversely proportional with the number of people watching me attempt to type coherently. So I'm just making a new class here called Generative Mock Weather Service. It's going to be very similar to the other one, except instead of using hard-coded values, it's going to grab some data on the fly from Gemini. So this is just a simple async generator, just like the other service. There we go. And so if I'm talking to an LLM, I'm going to need a prompt, right? And so I'm making a prompt creator here. It's going to take a place and a time and basically manufacture a string for me that I can use as a prompt. So I got a place and a time stamp there. I'm going to add in a date formatter. And pardon me, by the way, for using US dates instead of your more logical European style of putting the day and then the month. There we go. So I have a place and a time stamp. I've got a formatter in here. And now I can use string interpolation to make myself a prompt. So I'm going to go back to AI Studio. And I'm just going to grab this whole thing, paste it in here, just take it right out of AI Studio. Say Riverside, California, we'll make that the place. And this is the date. I'll use that formatted date, just like that. So now I've got a class here that I can give a couple of properties to, and it will make a version of this prompt that I was just using with the data that I want to use on the fly. So let me put that to work real quick. So I'll need a few things to talk to Gemini. This is the API key. More on that in a second. I have a link to reference to a generative model and an instance of the prompt creator that I just made. And this is the generation config. There are properties in with Gemini that you can tweak. So temperature is how sort of random and chaotic you'd like the responses to be. I can also specify here that I want JSON back as the MIME type. Let me do the safety settings as well. I should not put my hands here. It makes it look like I'm not really typing. So these are just the common safety settings that you can set for these models. So I can set a block threshold for harassment. I can set one for hate speech here. Sexually explicit, I have no idea what sexually explicit weather would look like, but I'm not interested in finding out. It's not, there we go. So I can set those up. Let me add here a constructor. So this is just a simple constructor that'll take a few properties and set these things up for me. All right, so I got a place and a timestamp and the API key. And using that, I'll fire up a model. And again, I'm going to use the 1.5 flash model because it's fast and it gives me the results that are perfectly good for my purposes. And I'll make the prompt creator. And so next, I just need a function to actually make a call. Most of this code, by the way, is coming out of, it's the same code in every Gemini sample we have. It doesn't actually change much because really you're just making a request to a server. So I'm going to say generate records here. And all I need to do is make a request and then parse the results. So this is where I ask the model to generate content, and I give it that prompt from the prompt creator. There we go. And it's kind of, it's just an HTTP request really under the hood. So I just need to decode it using Dart convert, and then parse it using the from JSON constructor in weather record. There we go. Awesome. Okay. And now that I have this, I can scroll down here and just make a call to that function. And now my async generator has access to the results of that call. Let me save that. And so that's my service. Now I've got this thing. I've got it set up, and I've got the call. Next, I just need to invoke this correctly. So I'm going to go back into my example app, and I'm going to add a couple things here. This is where I'm going to grab the API key out of the environment. So you can imagine the idea here is this is a package that I could put up on pub.dev. To use Gemini, I don't necessarily have a cloud project set up, another service that I would ever use to sort of gatekeep Gemini. What I can do, though, is put a little thing in my README and say, hey, go get a key, use a Dart define, put it in here, and that's how you can get access to the model. I don't have to worry about covering anybody else's expenses or anything like that. I don't have to ship one of my API keys or anything. I have a launch config here for VS Code that's setting it. One last change. With that here, I can just switch out which service I'm making. So instead of the mock weather service, I'll have a generative one. I'm giving it now that API key, and then up here I have put Berlin as the place. So let me save this and do a little restart here. If all goes according to plan. Oh no. I may have a demo gremlin. Sorry. Oh, thank you. I forgot to delete a line. Dankeschön. I love that somebody in this room spotted that immediately. Thank you so much, whoever just yelled that out. Let me restart the now correct code. And now I have weather. Again, this is for Berlin, but this is coming from Gemini on the fly. At developer time, you can imagine this, right? And if I wanted to come in here and test for any, if I'm a user and I'm testing my UI and I want to test for any city I want, we could do Paris in here. I could go back and do a hot restart, right? Maybe, I might have hard-coded that one, though. What about Paris, Texas? Anybody been to Paris, Texas? We actually have our own in the United States. I'm sure it's not as good. But I could do Paris, Texas if I wanted to. A little hotter there than the regular one. But screw it. Let's do Mars. What's the weather on Mars? Anybody know off the top of their head? Let's see if Gemini does fake Martian weather data. All right. A little colder on Mars. What do we, by the way, Germans in the audience, what does bewölkt mean? I have seen that word so many times rehearsing this, and I don't know when. Cloudy. Okay. That makes sense. Cloudy and cold on Mars. 60 below is definitely true. So this is something that it is in some sense ridiculous that I'm taking this model that probably cost tens of millions of dollars to make, and I'm using it to generate fake weather data. But hopefully this shows you there are little things that we can do to make our lives better that all add up to a better experience as engineers, a better experience building the things we actually want to build and paying attention to the code that really matters in our application. I think there are a lot of these opportunities. And as we go forward, like I said, I think it is y'all and people in rooms like this one that are going to decide what is hype and what is real. And so I want to encourage you to make those decisions. And that's my live coding. Let me see if I can find my presentation again and get it going. Well, that was my live coding slide. There we go. Because there are other opportunities like this. Is anybody in this room ever committed to Flutter launcher icons? Yeah, a few hands. I know Simon is one of the maintainers. This is one of my favorite packages in the whole Flutter ecosystem because it does one thing and it does it really well and it solves an annoying problem, right? Because no one in the world has ever said this, right? No one feels this way. And I didn't when I first used this package. The one and only app I've deployed to the App Store, like for real as a DevReller, used Flutter launcher icons to make those icons because it solved an annoying problem without me ever having to worry about it. And I think there are ways to build on that success. Like you can imagine, what if this was also saving the world from my programmer art by making the original icon for me using a model, right? These were just some examples that I threw together, again, using an image creator that are way better than anything I could do in Photoshop, right? And you could absolutely right now using, the same sort of techniques that, even with things that aren't, made with Google, there's a whole ecosystem of these tools. You could right now go off and make an improvement like that if you wanted to. And like I said, I think there are a lot of opportunities like this out there to be done. And it will be y'all. Again, this is my big idea slide. It will be folks like you who make these decisions about what is actually useful to us. And you'll be the ones who sort of cut down on that hype. And 5 years from now, all of this stuff will be boring. We'll have the 10% of the ideas that work and we'll use them all the time and we'll be through it. That is most of my talk. I just have a couple more slides real quick. I know I'm a little bit over time here. I'm going to try to wrap this up really quick. One, part of this event is the Flutter and Dart Package Ecosystem Summit, which is going on as part of the event. The first talk related to it is tomorrow. It's about native interop and how the landscape there is changing. On day 3, we'll have several unconference sessions. I'll be leading one. This Package Ecosystem Summit is for anyone who's an active package maintainer or thinks they might want to be an active package maintainer. It is open to everyone. So look for that in your agenda. And I just wanted to say one more thing before ending here. If you have been around me over the past 6 years that I've been working with Flutter, you have probably heard me say that Flutter is not just technology. Flutter is a group of people. And I want to say thank you to y'all, to you folks in this room right now, for being the kind of people who can make us a space like this feel safe. I normally make videos. I don't do live talks because I make mistakes. In a video, you make a mistake, you try a joke and it doesn't work, and the producer rolls his eyes at you and you just keep going. You record a new version and you end up with a video that looks like you never make a mistake. And that works out wonderful for me. I have never delivered a keynote talk in my life. And I would not have done this in any other community. I would not have felt safe doing it. And so I wanted to tell you, as you go out to enjoy this amazing event that Majid and Greg and Simon and everybody else have put together, all those organizers that you saw up there, know that you are doing a great job of that and be conscious of it as you keep going. If you see somebody you don't know and they give a great talk, go up and tell them that it's a great talk afterwards. Let them know that, And if you walk by somebody in the hall and it turns out they like a different state management library than you do and you overhear that, maybe that's fine and we don't really need to talk about it that much. And that's just normal, right? Because, the culture that we have as a community materially affects how much fun it is to be in Flutter and how the engineering velocity and the innovation velocity present in our community. You are doing work when you come here and make a space safe enough for somebody like me to fly around the world, be extremely jet lagged because I got up at 1 a.m. this morning, and do something that I've literally never tried before and feel safe doing it. That is an amazing thing that you just don't see that much of. So I want to say thank you for that and enjoy this amazing event. Thank you so much.